Welcome back to the Stigma Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Hayes, and today's guest is Socrates Rosenfeld. Soc is the co-founder and CEO of Jane Technologies, which is an e-commerce solution for the cannabis space that supports nearly 3,000 different brands and dispensaries, which is about half the market when you look at legal cannabis transactions in the United States each year. Prior to founding Jane, Soc was a consultant at McKinsey. Before that, he served in the Army as an Apache Helicopter Pilot. He earned an MBA from the MIT Sloan School of Management, and he got his undergrad degree from my alma mater, West Point. Soc has a very personal reason for building Jane. He's going to share that with us here in a few minutes. He's one of the most impressive founders I've ever met. And we at What If Ventures have had the chance to get to know him in 2021 as we were a really small part of their most recent funding round. And we've been able to witness firsthand what an amazing operator he really is. There are a number of ways to get in touch with Soc. We'll link to those in the show notes. But without further ado, I've been really looking forward to having this conversation. So Soc, thank you for being here today, man.
Likewise, brother. Pleasure to be on, man.
So I would love to start by having you tell us a little bit about your story, how you went from West Point to the Army to, consulting and business school, and then how you landed in the space that you're in, building one of the most successful cannabis e-commerce platforms in the marketplace.
Absolutely, man. So, and kind of told my story a few times, and every time I do, it's interesting. If I were to just draw a straight line from where I was in the Army to here, it really wouldn't make sense. But the fact that it took windy turns and unexpected turns and things that seemingly, doors closing, doors opening, struggles, et cetera, all led me to this. It's just in and of itself is a wonderful lesson that there are no straight lines in life. And the journey is a windy one, so might as well embrace it. My journey into cannabis really started after I got out of the Army. I was in the Army for about 7-8 years on active duty, flew helicopters for a while there, came back home physically, but I wasn't yet really home emotionally or spiritually. And it was back in Boston, Mass, where I grew up. And I was preparing to go to school at MIT for grad school. And here I am, a combat veteran, was an officer, to West Point, was a helicopter pilot. I thought to myself, I should be okay with respect to the transition. And that wasn't the case. If you think about anybody who's changed jobs or moved their families or did things like that, points of transition in their lives, it's a time of stress. Growth is stress, change is stress. And certainly when you're coming from a kinetic environment like the Army, and particularly in combat, I suddenly found myself sitting in my apartment in Boston, and it was as if I was, you ever ride one of those crazy roller coasters and you step off the platform when the ride is over and it takes some time to find your balance again. That's what I was going through spiritually and emotionally. And I really felt like I couldn't find my balance. So I did what every West Pointer does. You work harder, you train harder, you work out more, you study more, you clean your house more, all the things that we revert to, and nothing was bringing me peace. Nothing was really bringing me back home fully to myself. And I consumed cannabis for the first time, and it did change my life in kind of two major ways. One was obviously the physical, emotional, spiritual way, where in consuming cannabis more and more, I was finding my balance again. And I was revealing myself to myself again. And I was really coming back home. And also in parallel, what it did was, here was a product that I had resisted my entire life. I avoided, I was afraid of, I believed in all of the misinformation that I was told as a child, that whether, this is going to make you lazy or dumb or lead you to heroin use and substance abuse. None of that happened. And I remember thinking to myself pretty early on, what other things in my life have I considered to be true, just simply on face value, when I really should be looking at this for myself and to really own that truth. And that's that I once that door was open in my mind, I couldn't close that door anymore. And so my life now has been on this pursuit of truth, and largely it's inward. And so at the time at MIT, I was studying about fast growth technology. I really wanted to be a tech entrepreneur. And I had convinced myself that starting a tech company wasn't for military veterans. Military veterans were the folks that come in after you started the company as operators, as managers, et cetera. perhaps even as investors on the banking side. And I always thought, that's not me. And that was the last time I ever did that in my life, Stephen, because I graduated from MIT. I shifted out to Silicon Valley, where I was a consultant at McKinsey and Company. And I was so fortunate to be a part of that firm. And as kind of part of being a consultant, I got to take a peek behind the curtain. I got to meet the Wizard of Oz, if you will. I got to meet these CEOs. I got to get in the boardroom and see, okay, what is the magic? And then what I realized, Stephen, was CEOs of tech companies were human beings, just like you and me. And they didn't have all the information. They weren't the smartest human beings in the world. It's not like they didn't operate on, they still had to go to sleep. They still had questions and uncertainty that they had to deal with. And I thought to myself, I remember sitting in a boardroom looking at a CEO one time, and I said, you know what? I think I can do this. And it wasn't until my wife, my brother, my family, my trusted close friends, after telling them the idea of Jane, they were encouraging me to do it. And, my wife basically was like, hey, we're at a point in time in our life where if you don't do this now, when are you going to get another chance? It was one of the scariest things I've ever had to do was quit a good paying job. It was in the heart of Silicon Valley where rent is not cheap. For the first time in my life since I was 18 years old, I wasn't getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. There, in turn, was another lesson for me. Here I was making no money. I was 30 whatever years old, 33, 34. I accrued all this debt going to business schools, said no to a McKinsey, this, quote unquote elite firm. And I had never felt more free and more energized and more of myself than ever before. And I never want to lose that lesson. So set out, had this idea of making shopping online for cannabis just as easy and as simple as and as trusted as shopping online for everything else in this world. And that was back in 2015, 2016, put together a founding team of just absolute special human beings. My brother, family friend, Ben Green, two classmates of mine from MIT, Simon and Howard. And we set forth to go and do this and launched in April of 2017 here in Santa Cruz, California, and haven't looked back since. And now we're a very large tech company shaping an industry that is helping millions and millions of people every single day. And it's been an honor. And I speak on behalf of our entire team. We're so grateful to be here doing this. It's not easy, but it's a trip of a lifetime, man, for sure.
So tell me a little bit more about the Jane platform. Who do you serve and how do you help those people?
Yeah, so we'll take one step back. So if you think about what e-commerce has been really since the emergence of the .com, the internet, really there's kind of three big buckets that e-commerce falls into. You have kind of like the Amazon model, right? Where if you think about the last thing you purchased on Amazon, it's a wonderfully convenient company. I can't tell you how amazing it is to say, oh man, I lost my iPhone charger. Let me just go on Amazon and in 2 days or less, I'm going to get it shipped to me and I can find the best price and the most reputable seller. And I can get recommendations for their accessories just because I'm looking at a charger. That's really, really special. But at the end of the day, every time I order something from Amazon, I'm not ordering something from my local community. And here, at least in Santa Cruz, in Boston, where I've lived, military towns that you and I have lived in, that is the fabric, or these small businesses, restaurants and small businesses that really kind of form the communities that emerge as cities, et cetera. And that's going away. And I think that was accelerated with the pandemic, as we saw. It's tough to see stores, particularly small businesses, shutter up and close because they don't have the capabilities to digitize themselves. But as consumers, here we are, we'd love to drive and support our small businesses, but I'm not trying to wait in traffic. I don't know if they have my size. I can't find the best price. So I'm going to gravitate always towards an Amazon-like experience. So that's Amazon's model, purchasing power for the consumer. Then you have Shopify, which is unbelievable if you're a seller. If you and I are selling surfboard leashes and waxes, we have 3 sizes. We have a few different flavors of wax. We'd use a Shopify site, and that would be incredible, the technology, right? Because that creates this digitized online store, except that's only for direct-to-consumer sellers that have a very limited amount of SKU complexity. But if you walk into an actual surf shop here in Santa Cruz, for instance, they carry hundreds, if not thousands, of different SKUs, different sizes, different colors, different brands, et cetera, different categories. Things get very, very complex in the back end inventory data side of the house. And Shopify is not built for those brick and mortar sellers. That's why Amazon or Walmart doesn't run on Shopify. 7-Eleven, Bevmo, et cetera, your convenience store, grocery store, none of those folks, brick and mortar stores run on Shopify. It's very complex. But for a direct-to-consumer seller, man, is it super simple and easy, and Shopify's built a wonderful business doing that and supporting that group. So you have Amazon that's providing purchasing power for the consumer. You have Shopify that's creating this really easy-to-use plug-and-play e-commerce technology for direct-to-consumer sellers. And then you have the really only semblance of what we call O2O or online to offline or omni-channel in the form of Uber Eats or DoorDash. If you think about how wonderful it is to be able to access local goods and services through online technology, well, now you've seen this in the restaurant world. But the issue is in the restaurant world, there are some nuances to how they buy and sell things. I won't get into that. But at the end of the day, the model is very, very expensive. To kind of manage cars and deliveries and kind of own that infrastructure forces DoorDash to even get close to profitability. It forces them to take about 20 to 30% out of the margin of the restaurant. And they're also competing against this for the same user. So DoorDash actually doesn't share data or anything like that near as Uber Eats. It's just not in their model of these aggregators. But we love this idea of being able to access local goods and services offline through online technology. So it's a very long-winded way of saying, Stephen, that we provide for the consumer an Amazon-like shopping experience. We provide for the sellers, the brick and mortar stores, a Shopify plug-and-play technology. And now, really, for the consumer as well, we are able to be that connective tissue, just like DoorDash, between the online user and the offline product or service. So if you combine those three things, that's what we're bringing to the cannabis space. Is the ability to take offline merchandise and infrastructure and in real time essentially digitize that merchandise and that inventory and then push that across the internet in as many places as absolutely possible. A store's website, a brand's website, our own website. We power Leafly. We're in conversations with other top of funnel consumer marketplaces to power that. And basically what our goal is to take local goods and services in the cannabis space and push that digitally to as many online consumers as absolutely possible. And we do it in a way that doesn't overburden the sellers, the stores, because they have enough to deal with. The last thing they need to be doing is taking photos of products and writing lines of code. We'll take care of that just as easily as Shopify takes care of direct-to-consumer sellers. So that's what we've built. We're now in about 2,500 dispensaries, about 500 brands are using our platforms, about 50% of the market. And to think that we started here in Santa Cruz with a single store has been a pretty phenomenal story. So we're excited. We think the last thing I'll say on this one, Stephen, is we feel like the cannabis industry, because there is no Amazon, there is no Shopify, there is no DoorDash, what a blank canvas this is for technology companies like Jane to go and recreate or iterate or improve upon what we call e-commerce. And I think what you're going to see is in the next few years, the things that we bring to market here in the cannabis space will be applicable to other retail verticals. And we're only going to be able to do that because we're not anchored by other incumbents like Amazon, like DoorDash, like Shopify. And we can go and create something that's bespoke here in this new age of online to offline. And I don't think there's a better incubator for that than the cannabis industry itself here in the US.
It's interesting. It's like nobody's innovated on the e-commerce model since, I don't know, this is probably way oversimplifying it, but since Amazon. And Amazon's not going to come into the cannabis space for a whole bunch of reasons that a lot of people have covered extensively. So you get to go innovate on e-commerce in this space that the e-commerce giants aren't touching. And then once you prove out that innovation, you get to then go into their space and eat their lunch with a better platform that they just didn't innovate. And that's their problem.
Yeah. That's, all things must pass, right? All things must change. Before Amazon, there was big box stores like Walmart and Best Buy and Home Depot. And those were the biggest, baddest things in the 90s. Private equity backed those companies, huge. And before that, there were Sears and big department stores. And before that, there were, little tiny small businesses in communities. So I guess the point is there is always a next. And we've been now in this Amazon age for 30 years. There will be something next. And you're seeing that. You're seeing Square start to get involved, Toast, Olo, the things going on with Grab, what Uber Eats is doing, GoPuff. E-commerce is changing, and it's not looking like Amazon.
You're not building the Amazon of cannabis. You're building the Jane of e-commerce.
Amen, Ram. Well said. I'm just going to let that rest because that's very well said, and we believe that too.
So talk to me a little bit about building a space where the product isn't legal. There's a lot of conversation today, and we'll talk a little bit about legalization. A lot of conversation today about that. I think that's destigmatized the product a little bit. But that conversation wasn't even happening in 2015 the way that it's happening today. What was it like telling your wife and your friends that you're going to forego all other opportunities to build a platform to transact in an illegal substance?
Yeah. I mean, I was having conversations about what I was going to do if I went to jail. Not asking me about cost of customer acquisition. They were asking me like, hey, if I give you money, am I going to go to jail too if you get in trouble? So those are the kind of conversations that we were having back in the day. But we have a saying at Jane, it's like this rallying cry for us of go where it's hard, go where no one else wants to go. Not for like ego or bravado, but from a pure business sense, that's where the value is. If it's this, obviously I'm not trying to be a career criminal and just looking for ways to skirt around the law, but I had my conviction for the plant, my belief that the good that this plant can bring outweighed the risk and fear of getting in trouble. And it was a calculated risk, but one that I was willing to make for myself and one that my founding team was also willing to make. Some early investors, quite frankly. And that has been really has set the stage for us moving forward to say, okay, where can we go where no one else can really go? Let's go figure out a way to go there. We talk about that with our retail partners. Tell us the hardest things that challenge you and let us go and help you fix that. Because if we can do that, number one, we're not going to have a lot of competitors in the space. And number two, there's going to be real value there. Because if no one's done it and we do it, then we've created value. We're not copying, we're not riding coattails. We're not trying to take some model from the restaurant world and jam it in just to make some, a quick buck here in the space. What we're really trying to do is shape an industry and do it in partnership with the other courageous businesses that have taken a step in the dark and try to create something. And the majority of them are doing this because, obviously we're all private businesses. We want to make money and turn a profit, but there's something bigger behind that. And that is shaping an industry on a global scale. And what we do in the US will set precedent for how we work, how this industry looks in Europe, in Asia, South America. The Canadians, my wife is Canadian, so I'm going to give a shout out to the Canadians. They had the foresight to go and legalize before anybody else. But they're looking over the border to look at what the U.S. is doing in a still not a legal kind of federally legal from a federal standpoint market. But the technology, the brands, the things that are coming out of the U.S. that's what the Canadians are using. That will be the same globally. And so we have a responsibility here to kind of go in and shape it. And for us, we felt comfortable enough. We don't, quote unquote, touch the plant. So back in 2015, 2016, we felt comfortable enough to be able to shape the market through software. And now what we've realized is that software actually at scale is really the tool to really shape markets. As much as I love and respect brands and retailers, that's still a slice of the market. If you can go and kind of create 80, 90% adoption of a technology, well, guess what? That's what's going to be there for the market. And we take that very seriously at Jane. We're not trying to shortcut. We're not trying to just say good enough is good enough. We're trying to say, okay, what will work not a year from now, what will work 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now for this industry? And then, like you said, hopefully we get some learnings and uncover some some real value there to go and apply to other retail verticals. So, what started as a very kind of scary, uncertain area to operate in, and we look for those now at Jane. Obviously, we're not trying to be reckless, and we're trying to be mindful of, some rules are maybe worth breaking every once in a while. You and I went to West Point, right? We walked the area. Some rules are worth breaking, but you got to have conviction that they are worth it. And for us, it wasn't about fame. It wasn't about fortune. It was about helping people and providing access to a plant that helps them. And we're willing to take the risk back then, and that hasn't changed, and I don't think it ever will.
That's incredible. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the legislative landscape. Recently, a Republican congresswoman introduced a bill just this month trying to legalize. In 2021, earlier in the year, Congress passed a financial transaction bill, but it stalled in the Senate. And it wasn't because the Senate didn't want to do it. It's because Schumer said, hey, I want to do more than just worry about transactions. I want to legalize. So it seems to me like there's political will on both sides of the aisle to legalize cannabis, to make these transactions legal. And I just wanted to I think maybe the legalization conversation starts with, how did we get here? Like, what this current legal landscape that we're in, why are we in it? And where do we go from here?
I don't know how far back you want to go, but people in power were afraid for what this plant and other plant medicines were doing. They were healing people. They were opening their eyes. And so, we from the Nixon administration and even before that, kind of, in my opinion, racially driven legislation, the politicians were able to manipulate the perception of this plant and create regulations that suppress this plant. But in doing so, really what it was trying to do was suppress the people. And I want to give a shout out to pioneers like Dennis Perrone and Val from Wham, and people who, if you ask the CEOs of cannabis companies today, they would never even know who Dennis Perrone is. Dennis Perrone was a Vietnam veteran, a lawyer who fought very hard for gay rights. At the time, he was in San Francisco. The homosexual population was dying because of AIDS. It was very scary. And he saw an opportunity as so savvy to basically create Prop 215 and create legislation that allowed for safe access to a medicine for terminally ill patients. And from there was born the legal kind of a gray area, I put legal in quotations, for this plant. And if you think about it, it wasn't about money. It was about helping people. And that's the truth. It's not some speculation. Go talk to people who have consumed cannabis. It helps them, right? We've all been there. And so now you see that in other legislative kind of developments. Gay marriage is a great parallel. You're arguing against gay marriage 30, 40 years ago. Legally, and maybe I'm going to be pretty polarizing, but I can only speak the truth, or my version of the truth, Stephen. So, legally, maybe you thought you had something if you were arguing against that. But at the end of the day, it's a moral argument, and morality doesn't have, in my opinion, any real place in legislation. And so states started to realize, okay, what's the truth? Love is love. All right, you see Hawaii, you see Massachusetts, DC, et cetera. You see more progressive states start to pick up on that. And then before you know it, all the states have done this. And now that puts pressure on the federal government to basically say, okay, we're going to sign off on this. The exact same thing is going to happen in cannabis. You saw California go, Colorado, Washington, Massachusetts, right? Progressive states. Now you got states like Mississippi, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Georgia's online for this, Virginia, South Carolina's talking about this, North Carolina. You start having those states talking about state rights, et cetera. There's a leading indicator of good things to come if you're in favor of legalization. And so I think it's a matter of when, not if. Whether you're a Republican, Democrat, you're rich or poor, North, South, East, West Coast, doesn't matter. Black, white, old, young, woman, man. The one thing that kind of unites us is our love for cannabis and the acceptance of the truth that it does help people. And so as long as that continues and we continue to see states legalize, then I think it's only a matter of time before you're going to see federal legalization. And the fact that you and I are talking about this as a reality is wonderful. We weren't talking about that in 2015. When Trump got elected, we thought the industry was over. And that didn't happen. Now it's bigger than a president. It's bigger than one state. It's bigger than legislation. It transcends political divide. It's going to happen. And it's going to happen, I think, sooner than we think. Does it happen tomorrow? Probably not, because politicians have to position, big banks have to position, but that's taking place. And I think another kind of big thing that we haven't yet addressed as a country is that this is going to be a 18, $19 billion market this year. There are billionaires being minted in this space, yet there are tens of thousands of people still imprisoned for this plant. And so this affects not just healthcare, this affects not just banks, it affects the criminal justice system. So this is a big change for the country, but we're getting closer and closer to accepting the truth. And when we do, I think, it's going to be a beautiful day for this country when we can actually legalize this plant fully. But really it comes back to the truth. And the truth is that this plant is not dangerous. This plant helps people. And this plant transcends political divide. So if you run with those three ingredients, I think you're going to see legalization here happen in a matter of years, if not next year. We'll see. But it'll be good for folks like Jane and folks like you, Stephen. And ultimately, I think it's going to be wonderful for the American people and for the world. The U.S. still represents something in this world. And if we accept this plant for what it is, then I think other countries will. We just saw Germany legalize, right? You're going to see some Asian countries legalize here soon. So it's exciting. But at the end of the day, it comes back to folks like Dennis Perone, a military veteran who went where it was hard, who was not afraid, who saw this rule as worth breaking to help his community and his friends. There are so many other companies like that right now today, and it's wonderful. And so let's not forget where we came from.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. It feels to me like the public perception has changed drastically even in the last couple of years. I mean, it feels to me like, maybe when you started this business in 2015, people might have looked at you a little bit funny, but nowadays, I don't know a lot of people that view cannabis the way they did 6 years ago when you started this company.
Yeah, man. It's because of people like you and me. And I'm not saying specifically like you and me, but people who have shared their truth. It's scary to share their truth. I remember, I used to consume cannabis early on, and I was so ashamed that I was doing it. I would just be so ashamed. Oh man, I would feel guilty. I'd be embarrassed if I had to tell someone. And I'll never forget, man, I was at this, I was talking to a Navy SEAL. He got out and he was going through it like all of us do, through the transition. And he was explaining to me, man, he's like, man, I got given this joint at a party a few weeks ago. And I take one puff from it before I go to bed, and I'm able to actually get sleep. And then I'm able to wake up and be there for my wife. I'm able to be there for my kids. I remember hearing him, and he also had this sense of shame in his voice. And man, I was like, you know what? I'm done with it. If I can't be myself and live my truth, then who am I really? I'm not who I think I am. That's what's changing people's perspective. It's not just the veteran community. It's people like, Charlotte's Web. That strain was grown for a girl who was suffering from epileptic seizures, and her parents had no other option. And they said, all right, screw it. I'm going to try to give this to my daughter, who's a child. And my God, it helped her. Or people like, my grandmother who has arthritis and glaucoma, and she consumes and she feels better. That's what's changing perspective. It's not a TV show. It's not a movie. It's not a celebrity. It's everyday people sharing their truth and being honest with not only themselves, but their loved ones. And that is what's changing the perspective. And I don't see that slowing down anytime soon, man. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I don't see it slowing down. I hope that it accelerates. And one of the things you'd mentioned something about the size of the market. There's a lot of reports you can read out there about the size of the cannabis market in the United States. Some people say 18, 19, 20 billion. Some people say 30, $40 billion market. It doesn't really matter what people write down on a piece of paper and call the market. I think most of this market is transacting in the shadows. And when it does come online, when it is legal, the market is way bigger than any of these research reports or these journalists say that it is. So putting the printed articles aside and the printed research reports, how big do you think this market is?
They say 100 billion today. Like you said, 80% of it is people going to drug dealers or going to the illicit market. It's not always fair to kind of lump them in, but finding other ways. Basically, they're willing to break the law to get this medicine. Where else in the world are people willing to break the law, for something at this scale? Nowhere else in the world. And so you bring up a great point. We could call it a 20 billion, 30 billion, whatever that is. But like you said, the majority of it is still unrealized. The large majority of it, not just in the United States, but globally. This has the opportunity to be one of the biggest industries in the world globally. Certainly, it's the fastest growing in the world. Crypto, for instance, big market, right? We still have to wait for people to be able to adopt crypto. And so that's still a TBD. In cannabis, the demand is there. It's been existing demand for generations, And so as a business, if you can position yourself now, as the market goes from dark to light, you're going to benefit from that. But you have to spend some time in the dark. And again, it goes back to, are you willing to do that? And for the right reasons. And can you stay? Can you stick around and not be a flash in the pan? That's the question. But I think this is a $100 billion market today in the US alone. And in 5 years, the majority of that is going to be pushed into the legal market. So that's an exciting one to look forward to.
And so that market that you have significant market share in today because you were such a trailblazer here, how do you go capture that? You can't process a credit card transaction to buy cannabis. Everything's done in cash. How does Jane operate in a world where you're sort of waiting on pins and needles for people to tell you that it's actually really okay for you to do the thing that you're doing? How does that work?
The metaphor we use at Jane is, what we're doing now is we're planting seeds and setting roots. That's what we're doing. We can't yet pick the fruits, if you will, make money off this at a massive scale. Okay. So if that's not available to us, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it keeps the large majority of companies out, because you can't really monetize on this business yet. But for the investors and entrepreneurs who have the foresight of what's coming, and all we're doing is planting seeds and setting roots. You ever see one, I forget, it's an individual, I think in India, who's and then probably all over the world, but who just spend 50 years just planting trees, and then you 50 years ago you see it and it's just an open plain with nothing, and then 50 years later you see this photo of like a bona fide rainforest. That's what we're doing, and we're making sure our roots are strong. We're making sure we're planting the seeds in the right places. We're making sure our soil is fertile. That's what we're doing now. And then when you can process a credit card payment online, and again, I think that's coming sooner rather than later, then we'll be able to start picking fruit. But we can't get to the fruit without the roots. And that's what we're doing right now. And it takes patience. It takes perseverance. It takes faith, just like any good farming project. But if you can stay diligent, make sure you water your seeds, and when it's time to harvest, you'll be in position. That's what we're ready for. And that's scary for some companies. And they don't like that. They want to turn a quick buck and get out. And for us, we actually think the opposite. The longer and the more painful it is, oh man, we like it here. And we'll keep planting our seeds and sending roots, because one day the time will come where you can now harvest and monetize on this business, and we'll be in a position to capture this value at scale.
If I had to put you on the spot and ask you, as an entrepreneur in the last 6 years, what's the hardest part? What's the biggest challenge you've faced or are facing? What comes to mind as a big hurdle that you've either had to overcome or that you're going to have to overcome?
It's every day, Stephen. It's remembering who you are. And I don't mean, you went to Ranger School, or it's really only you know that. Your close loved ones can get a really close glimpse, but truly the only person that knows who you are is you. I didn't know who I was in the Army. And so I had the Army tell me who I was. I had ribbons tell me who I was. I I had deployments and training and badges and ribbons and things like that tell me who I was. And then I got out and didn't know who I was. And so I had MIT tell me who I was. Okay, cool. I'm an MIT grad. That must be who I am. Or McKinsey. And that wasn't who I was. And I had been in the back of my mind convincing myself that I was someone that I really wasn't, that I wasn't an entrepreneur, that I couldn't do that. I couldn't start a business in Santa Cruz. I couldn't start a business in cannabis. And man, if I believed everyone that told me I couldn't, or if I believed everyone that told me that I was something that I really deep down in my gut knew that I was not, I wouldn't be here. So every day that is that. And I have to look at myself in the mirror and remind myself who I am. And I'm not saying like I'm a superhero. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm just a human being that I can feel fear, that I can feel uncertainty, that I can feel doubt. But I realize that's not who I am. And that's been the lesson for me since day one of this thing, man. And truly, as hard and as painful at times, right? We've all been entrepreneurs, or some of us who are listening. What a gift that is. I didn't get that at McKinsey. It's a great company, but I wasn't forced to look at myself and be like, man, who are you? Do you have faith in yourself? I have that every day at Jane. And it's every time I work on something at Jane, I learn a little bit more about myself. And that's where the journey is. It's inward. And so that's the biggest lesson for me, and the biggest challenge that I've had to continuously overcome. And that's the practice, and that's the meditation, is remembering who I am when perhaps the world is telling me I'm something else, but to really trust myself. And any entrepreneur who's gone through the parable, who's walked the path, will tell you, I would argue, will tell you the exact same thing. So both a blessing and a curse, but a wonderful lesson regardless.
Kind of along those lines, talking about other entrepreneurs, because we do have a lot who listen here. What advice on kind of more of a tactical level would you have for an aspiring founder that wants to build in the cannabis space, or maybe just build in general? What's something that you wish you had known in 2015 that now you know that, maybe it could have saved you some heartache if you had 2021 Soc could have told 2015 Soc what's up?
I mean, really, if I could go back and tell myself in 2015, I would say, listen, it's not going to go like you think it's going to go. And that's beautiful. And that's the way it's supposed to go. And embrace that. I've spoken about uncertainty and risk, the difference between those two. But that's really what I would tell myself is dance with the uncertainty. Really dance with it. One chance. I don't know when I'm going to start another company, Stephen, like this moment in time with my brother, my close friends. I'm here for all of it. And I think at the beginning, I was here just for the good stuff. Oh, we get a raise, or we get, we close a deal, and that's wonderful and beautiful. But that stuff isn't as sweet without the other stuff. And that's life. So that's for me what I would be telling myself is embrace the uncertainty, dance with it, and understand that it's grist for the mill, man. It's the journey, and that journey that you walk externally is actually one that's more inward. So it's been it's been a trip, man, to use that word on purpose. It's been a real trip to take, and I'm here for all of it. And I want to be as present as I possibly can, not just for the good times, also for the crazy, uncertain, challenging times. And that's where you get to know yourself the most. So I would just remind my 2015 self of that. And I wonder what the 2026 version of Soc is should be telling me right now. But we'll see. We'll see.
Where's the white space in cannabis? I mean, I feel like you probably know this market better than anybody. You certainly know it better than anybody I've met. You can't boil the whole ocean, Soc. So if you were sitting there saying, you know what, I'm going to deploy a little bit of angel money into the cannabis space, what would founders be going after right now that you would view as, oh man, that definitely needs to be done and I can't get to it?
That I can't get to part is the tough one for me. So I'll just say the ones that,
or maybe you're not going to get to, or you're not going to get to right now, or you can fix my broken question.
No, I think, I'm strictly talking about software, because there is stuff that's plant touching that I think is really interesting. No one's yet figured out the franchise model in cannabis. I think it's right for it. There are some really exciting brands that are starting to hit the mainstream. But from a software standpoint, I think no one has really owned the end consumer. And I don't mean own in the nefarious way where they control and like manipulate people, but just as like a place of hey, I'm going to order cannabis online. I'm going to go to this one place digitally. No one's done that yet. I think there are companies, Jane included, that are vying for that position. So that's really interesting. No one's really figured out payments in this space. Is it going to be one of these organic cannabis companies to figure this out, or are we just going to wait for Square and Fiserv to move in? So that's really interesting. I think largely data has been an undervalued asset in this space. Because people are just aggressively looking for. You can't open up a dispensary in Pennsylvania and not make money. Same in Illinois, Florida, right? It's just the demand outweighs the supply. So you don't need to figure out how to price or what to carry necessarily. But at some point, it will get competitive and you will need to prioritize and put a premium on really actionable data. So I think that's been an untapped asset. So that's what excites us at Jane, quite frankly, and we'll get there, whether that's by ourselves or through partnerships. But that's really, really exciting. And then there's this whole B2B space, the likes of Cannabis and LeafLink and Leaf Trade, et cetera. Those companies are kind of vying for that. But if you think about who are the biggest companies in alcohol, it's the distributors. So distribution is going to be key. How does that look? So I think we're still in the very early innings of this space and people establishing their positions, but plenty of running room, plenty of room to innovate. And for me and the team at Chain, that's the most exciting part of it is, how can we get involved? How can we participate? How can we help others create value in partnership? Because at the end of the day, what we do today will shape this industry for generations to come. So let's make sure we get this right and think about things thoughtfully to create as much value and as much opportunity, as much diversity as absolutely possible in this space, and not shortchange this plant. I think it deserves our attention to make sure we get this right.
Right on. Absolutely. I have really enjoyed this conversation. I've been so enthralled with what you've been telling me that I've probably forgotten to ask something really obvious. What did I miss here?
I think we hit on it, man. We talked about regulations. We talked about personal journey. We talked about the business side. We talked about legalization. Oh, man, I think we covered it. I think the big takeaway from this is let's not forget where we came from and why we're all in this space, why you're in this space, Stephen, why I'm in this space. Plant medicine has helped us and those that we love. And so let's keep that going. And you're doing it through investment. We're doing it through software. There are companies building products and growing plants and creating different things. But man, if we did that and we all at the forefront had the plant at top of mind, we're all going to do very, very well, and we're going to do good in parallel. And what more could you ask for in the U.S. starting a business? So let's not forget where we came from, why we're doing what we're doing. Because if we do that, if we don't forget, then we'll create great technology, we'll create great partnerships, and ultimately provide as much access to a plant that helps so many people around the world. And so, what an honor it is to be part of that story, really. And thanks so much for having me on, Stephen.
And thank you for letting us be a part of that story, man. It really means a lot. So grateful that you've let us be just a tiny, small part of the Jane story, and grateful to have you come on here and educate our audience about what you're doing and about the space that you're operating in. I mean, I'm really grateful that you'd spend this much time with us. So thank you for doing this.
Anytime, brother. It's an honor to have you guys in our corner.
Thank you again, Soc, for those kind words and for being here today and sharing with us. It's really so inspiring to hear from founders like you that have just taken their own personal experience and through their own vulnerability and authenticity, they turn that into an enormous platform that helps people and shapes these burgeoning markets. So really grateful that we know you and that we've been able to spend time with you. For those of you listening, there are a number of ways to connect with Soc. We'll link to those in the show notes. To our listeners, thank you so much for being here. And please, if you like the content, give us a subscribe or a like or review on your podcast platform of choice. And we'd love it if you'd share this episode with a friend. To the startup founders out there, don't forget to join the Mental Health Startup Slack community. If that's a fit for you, you can find a link to that in the show notes. And check out the What If Fellowship program, which is this 8-week accelerator program that we've designed to help healthcare startups and prospective entrepreneurs validate their ideas, learn how to build a business, and perfect their business plan while preparing to pitch investors. You can learn more about that through the fellowship tab on our website or via a link here in the show notes. Finally, we want to hear from you. Please do comment on social media. Let us know what you liked, what you want to hear more of. You can reach out to us on Twitter at StigmaCast. You can find us on Instagram at Stigma Podcast. You can email us at info@stigmapodcast.com. And you can obviously find us on our website. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, stay safe, be well, and thank you for your support.